He's such a boring guy, seriously. I mean, he's incredibly dull, and being around him just drags me down too. Having kids is out of the question. I get hives from stress just by being touched. Hiding in the closet, John, overheard my wife's outrageous complaints, trembling with shock and sadness. The reason I was hiding there was that I had finished work unusually early that day and decided to surprise her by hiding in the closet. I had planned to startle my wife when she got home, but I was the one who ended up being surprised. When my wife got home from work, she began talking to someone on her phone without noticing I was there. And then she started bad-mouthing me, using every filthy word she could think of. Unable to endure her tirade any longer, I quietly emerged from the closet. My name is John. I work in sales at a major food manufacturer. I met my wife, Emily, at a college mixer, and after falling for her at first sight, my persistent efforts led to our marriage. Emily is a magazine model affiliated with a modeling agency. With her charming looks and sociable, cheerful personality, she was the wife I was proud of. We had a grand wedding and chose the popular Hawaii for our honeymoon. Under the clear blue sky, we relaxed at the beach resort and then indulged in shopping at the world-famous brand stores. However, the reality of drifting apart awaited us when we returned from our honeymoon. Working for a major food company, I had a decent salary, but late nights were common, and I often traveled for work. As a result, I was hardly home on weekdays, despite being newlyweds. Emily, due to her job, left home earlier than me and returned at irregular hours. Gradually, we started having dinner separately and couldn't even share breakfast together. Then one day, returning from a business trip, I found that the double bed in our bedroom had been replaced with 2 single beds. Shocked, I confronted Emily. "What is all this? We spent so much time choosing that double bed when we got married, didn't we?" But her response was smooth and nonchalant. "We wake up and go to bed at different times, and it's hard to rest well in one bed, right? So I traded it in for 2 singles." She explained it all smoothly, as if it was no big deal. But I just couldn't shake the feeling that there was another reason, and I couldn't accept her explanation. Because 6 months into our marriage, Emily had started refusing me, even when I asked. Even when we shared a bed, she would stiffen up to avoid any contact, curling up at the edge. Had I done something to upset her? I reviewed my actions in everyday life, but couldn't pinpoint any incident that could have caused such a rift. Gradually, dark suspicions grew in me, wondering if Emily had someone else. Once the suspicion of infidelity entered my mind, it was hard to shake off. During this time, I left for a week-long business trip. Leaving home felt unsettling, but is just part of being a salaried employee. As she saw me off, Emily seemed unusually kind. It felt as if she was happy about my absence. With a dry smile, I set off for Nebraska, a city covered in snow, looking for a mental escape. When I finally arrived after taking the flight, I found myself in a silver world where everything was covered in snow. The view, like a world of silver, seemed to cleanse my troubled mind. I continued with a new product campaign at various supermarkets, with only one day left. However, the last meeting was abruptly canceled due to a family emergency for the president of the supermarket chain. The company told me to head straight home after returning to New York, considering my fatigue from the long trip. I was secretly thrilled at the unexpected half-day off and reached for my phone to tell Emily. But then, I hesitated and put the phone down. What was Emily doing when I wasn't around? A mix of curiosity and suspicion churned inside me. So, I returned home early for a change, confirmed Emily wasn't there, and hid in the closet. And that's when I heard those terrible words. When I suddenly appeared from the closet, even though I wasn't supposed to be there on a business trip, Emily was so surprised that she dropped her phone on the floor. Well, I guess so. She said so many bad things about me. I stared at my wife with cold eyes as she reacted like something out of a cartoon. When I saw my wife for the first time in a week, she was still beautiful, wearing a suit with good taste. I should have thought that she was a waste of a woman for me. Emily's true feelings, which I secretly listened to, were surprisingly vulgar and childish. I felt my love for my wife suddenly disappear. The person in question didn't even pick up the dropped cell phone. That's not true. There was a reason for what we were talking about earlier. As if clinging to me, she frantically started making incoherent excuses. Her appearance was not her usual confident self. I shook off Emily's hand and said, "Sorry, being with me must be depressing, right? I'll leave as you wish. I need to clear my head." With that, I packed the bare essentials and left our home. Emily was sobbing, but I didn't feel like comforting her, as it was her own doing. Exhausted from a business trip and with my feelings in tatters, I somehow managed to reach a cheap inn. I took a shower there and shut myself in the room. Unable to sleep, despite being tired, I lay there looking at the ceiling, reflecting on my marriage with Emily. It had already been 2 years since we got married. Just 6 months into our marriage, our bedroom life became non-existent. Whenever I tried, Emily would just refuse. I tried watching love stories together and making an effort to be more affectionate, but it had no effect. Emily kept rejecting me. Initially, I felt sad being rejected, but Emily had always been indifferent, and I was too busy with work to worry about our lack of intimacy. There were other couples around us who also had no intimacy in their marriage, so I thought it was normal and didn't think much about it. No, I was too ashamed to admit my own rejection and chose not to think about it. It might be time for us to seriously discuss our future as a couple. To decide if there's still a reason for us to stay together. The next early morning, I checked out of the inn and stepped outside. The nightmare from the day before was still on my mind, and I hardly slept. I warmed my numb hands with my breath as I turned the key to my apartment. The apartment was deserted and eerily quiet. I thought for sure that Emily was out, so I opened the door to go get some coffee from the kitchen to have in the living room. Wasn't Emily crouched down in the kitchen, swollen and exhausted from crying? She must have cried all night. "John, I'm truly sorry about yesterday. Please listen to my story." As she said this, collapsing in tears, she seemed to be deeply regretting her harsh words. If I were still head over heels for Emily as I once was, I might have forgiven her immediately. But looking at Emily's tear-streaked face again, she seemed like a complete stranger to me. In that moment, I realized I no longer trusted Emily, and felt the pain of knowing we couldn't go back to how we were. I'm going to the office right after having some coffee. While hurriedly making coffee and rummaging through the fridge, I retreated to my study without saying a word to Emily. For the following week, we continued living like strangers in the same house, and I managed my work while consulting about our future with various people. However, the only response I got was, "You're married, and it's not like your partner cheated on you, so you should forgive her." True, there was no evidence of Emily's infidelity, and she was taking good care of the home. But my decision remained unshaken. If we were to continue living together, rejected by Emily, there was no point in staying married. It wasn't just about physical intimacy, it was also about my earnest desire to have children someday. I quietly placed the divorce papers I had filled out on the living room table and went to bed without waiting for her return. That night, I suddenly awoke to a soft sensation on my leg. Emily should have been sleeping on the living room sofa. Reconsidering, I closed my eyes again, and this time, slender arms wrapped around my waist. The warm touch jolted me awake. It must have been Emily, who had slipped into the bed. When was the last time I felt the warmth of human skin? For a moment, I almost gave in to my desires as a man. At the same time, I remembered the harsh words Emily had hurled at me, like "You're such a boring man, and it's impossible for us to have children." Instantly, those feelings withered away. To Emily, whose arms were tightly wrapped around my waist, I said, "Can you let go of me? Please, don't disappoint me anymore." As I spoke, I roughly shook off her hands. After a while, Emily, still in bed, began to cry softly. "I'm truly sorry for hurting you. The truth is, ever since elementary school, I was harassed daily by a teacher, who was a man, which made me uncomfortable around men. That's why I couldn't respond to your advances." Hearing the shocking truth, I couldn't believe my ears. I want children too, and I've always wanted to be a mother, but I just couldn't bring myself to be intimate, and I've been blaming myself for it. So, to vent my frustration, I ended up making it seem like it was your fault to our friends. I wanted to apologize to you properly on our last day together as a couple. Seeing Emily sincerely apologize, I was deeply moved. Despite being married for 2 years, it was the first time I had heard about Emily's sexual trauma. Now that I think about it, every time I tried to touch her, she seemed to tense up. I was angry at myself for not understanding my wife's suffering at all. They say a marriage is like a mirror, but Emily's disrespectful behavior towards me was a reflection of my own lack of compassion towards her. I was glad that I realized my mistake before we parted ways. As soon as I felt this, tears welled up in my eyes. It might be because this is probably our last night together. In bed, I gently held Emily's hand. Even for us, there were plenty of happy moments in our marriage. How about we share one pleasant memory each, in turn, as our last memory? When I suggested this, Emily, wiping her tears, nodded in agreement. Yeah, the 2 years we spent as husband and wife were fun, weren't they? They weren't wasted at all. We began to talk, bit by bit. How Emily's dad cried a lot at our wedding. How I lost my wallet and caused a big fuss on our honeymoon. How we fought over our completely opposite tastes when choosing furniture. How happy I felt when I came home late and saw the lights on in the house. One story after another, just between the two of us. That night, we lay in bed and talked about our memories all night long. In the end, the feeling that remained wasn't regret, but gratitude for the 2 years we had together. The next day, because I stayed up until dawn, I was completely sleep-deprived and rubbed my sleepy eyes as I headed to the living room. On the table were Emily's signed divorce papers, along with a note that said, "Be happy." Next to me, there was a breakfast box containing all my favorite foods. Looking around the room, all of Emily's belongings had vanished without a trace. It was as if our marriage had been a dream. I remembered Emily's lonely smile from the day before. Wishing for each other's happiness, I muttered to myself and slowly savored the last breakfast she made for me. Several years later, I'm visiting the local park. A small hand, like a maple leaf, is firmly holding mine, and I make sure not to let go. Having remarried another woman since then, I was blessed with the child I had always wanted. Raising a child is harder than I thought, but I'm living a fulfilled and happy life. There have been various experiences to get to this point, but they make me cherish my current life even more. Wishing for Emily's happiness, wherever she is.